I witnessed a multitude of kids that we played against that were more than qualified to be drafted. No, you didn't. Hey folks, Kenn Rashad, HBCU Sports. I'm guessing by now you've heard the news that in this past NFL draft, there were no HBCU players drafted. However, if there is a bright side to any of this, there were a number of HBCU players who did sign free agent agreements. You probably also saw the statement that was posted by Deion Sanders on Instagram expressing his outrage over the fact that there were no HBCU players drafted. Let's take a look at that. He said, "And we have the audacity to hate on one another while our kids are being neglected and rejected. I witnessed a multitude of kids that we played against that were more than qualified to be drafted. My prayers are that this won't ever happen again. Get your knife out my back and fight with me, not against me." There's so many layers of inexperience, naivete in that particular statement, but there's one in particular that I really think we need to focus on. Let's follow me on this. Let's go back. He says, "I witnessed a multitude of kids that we played against that were more than qualified to be drafted." The kids that Deion Sanders witnessed this past spring season weren't qualified to be drafted. They weren't qualified to be drafted. Deion Sanders did not know that the kids who played this spring season weren't qualified to be drafted. So why would he try to give us the impression that some way, somehow, he knows what he's talking about when he doesn't? And if you're the head coach of a Division I institution, you would think that at the very least, a coach would know who is and who isn't drafted or draftable for the NFL draft. Now, there were a number of FCS players who were drafted, but keep in mind, those individuals opted out of spring play. They said, "I'm not going to play spring football," for the simple fact that they wanted to place emphasis on possibly getting drafted. And that included HBCU players. There were 6 players in total from FCS schools. 3 of them came from North Dakota State. 2 of them came from Northern Iowa. 1 of them, I believe, came from Central Arkansas. But they went through the proper steps to make sure that they were draft eligible. Apparently, Deion Sanders didn't get that memo. And you don't have to be a college head football coach to know this. The reason why this is so troubling is for a number of reasons, but primarily for the fact that Deion Sanders has millions of followers on social media, on his social media platforms. And so many of them are so enamored by what he says and what he does, they're going to automatically assume, because he's an NFL Hall of Famer and he's got all this panache and he's got all these connections, they're just going to assume that whatever he says is gospel and the truth, which in this particular instance is not. It's wrong. It's inaccurate. And if you, like Deion Sanders, who wants to be a so-called spokesperson for all HBCUs, you would think that he would do HBCUs the service to at least take the time to learn the HBCU landscape. But when you are in the back of a line for a head coaching position, and you placed in the front of the line simply because of who you are with zero experience, these are the type of sophomore mistakes that you're going to make. And nobody wins when you're in a situation like that. Now, of course, there are going to be some of you who will say, "Ken, what he meant to say," no. This isn't about what Deion Sanders meant. This is about what Deion Sanders said. Keep in mind, he's only coached 1 season. It was a short season. an abbreviated season. It was just this past spring season. And again, he said, I witnessed a multitude of kids that we played against that were more than qualified to be drafted. They were not qualified to be drafted. Deion Sanders didn't know that. And apparently, folks within Deion Sanders' circle, or those who know better, or those who have access to him, won't take the time to make him aware of it. Then he goes on and he talks about these get your knife out of my back and fight with me, not against me. One can only assume that Deion Sanders is talking about those individuals who in the past have been critical for things that he's either said or done that just simply were worthy of being called out upon. There have been multiple publications who've criticized him about things that he said. There have been coaches who just basically talked about him and didn't necessarily care about his feelings. And then media outlets like HBCU Sports in the past who have taken the time to criticize him about things that he said that just simply weren't true. This is one of those times. But the one thing about this I will say, any of the individuals that have been critical of Deion Sanders were direct. Nobody took the time to say anything about him behind his back. That's just Deion Sanders playing the role of victim. I think Deion Sanders is finally coming to the conclusion that this HBCU stuff is hard. It's not easy. And just like anything else that requires experience, coaching is no different. Again, if Deion Sanders wants to be the voice for HBCUs, he owes it to HBCUs to know what he's talking about. And as it stands right now, he doesn't.